Okay, and here we go. Yeah, it does. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA, and we're going to be talking about focus today, and also ROI. That ought to be a hoot. I hope you hang around and watch for that one. That one is just priceless. It's from the LinkedIn AI staff, I guess. Anyway, here's today's Tom Fishburne cartoon. He's got big ideas. I need to stay focused and not get distracted by, and then the phone goes off from his friend the squirrel. I'm not sure what. But this is a takeoff on an earlier cartoon, which I have down below, and we'll talk about that. But it's the same idea. The same idea is that we're so distracted, and I'm as guilty of it as I'm probably more guilty of it than anybody because I sit in a one-man office basically these days, and I look for distractions. I mean, I don't think anything that Tom says really hits that one. That's the worst of it, is that as an isolated solopreneur, if you will, I want connection, and there isn't any unless I go check it all the time, and that to me is a poor substitute for real conversations and real thinking. But it makes me feel like I'm connected, and that may be the most serious and scary and perhaps damaging side of this, which Tom doesn't get into, which is probably just as well. We'll all get depressed. But he starts, our aha moments are literally quiet brain signals. I used to do a lot of on-site, well, we didn't have the internet, so when I started out in consulting, I would give a speech at the DMA or something. I've given about 100 speeches at least at national conferences. And people would decide to have me come in and look around. I would do sort of a best practices marketing audit. Sometimes I would look over the marketing, what the marketing people were doing for the CFO or the CEO. A lot of times they would have me come in. And I always scheduled it. It's a little hard to get out of Milwaukee, or you got to get up early and drive to O'Hare. And a lot of times direct marketing companies, direct mail companies, catalog companies especially, are where the owner wants to be. They can be off the beaten path by a long, long ways. And so it takes a while to get there. So I would usually try to get there by lunchtime-ish. And then, we would maybe go to lunch right away or walk around the plant and talk a little bit, then go to lunch or go right into meetings. And we would kind of scope out what was the point of this. I remember going to Frank Cahill's, Frank Kaywood down in Augusta, Georgia, where the Masters is. And all of a sudden, like a dozen people marched in. And I thought it was going to be a marketing audit, and for some reason they thought I was some kind of IT consultant. And so they said, well, we're concerned about Y2K. This was, right before that, a year or two before that. And they said, IBM says it's going to cost us $180,000 to upgrade our systems, but it would be more than that if we change to a new order processing system. And we process in batches. We promote a book, and then if there's enough response, we produce the book. That's called a dry test. For you oldies would know that, but for young people, it's called a dry test, where you promote a product or a book, and if there's enough response, then you print it. And that used to be a thing. That used to be wait 8 to 12 weeks for delivery, something like that. It would say, you'd see them on TV commercials, late night, stuff like that. Anyway, so I sat in there and I listened to how they ran their business, and I said to them later, I said, well, if you just stack up your orders, just make sure that on the books you produce, you stop producing them in December, fulfill all those orders, and then just stop everything and start new on January 1st. I said, there's nothing really in your computer that is that sensitive. The only crazy stuff would be like if you were billing for electricity and you went across New Year's and all of a sudden billed somebody for $1,000 worth of 1,000 years of 1,000 years of electricity or something like that. I said, it's not going to be a big deal. Anyway, their IT person told me months later that I had saved him $100,000 at least. And then IBM came up with a little quick, easy workaround where they used an alpha character instead of, 2000. The computer saw 200A, and that was enough. And it would then interpret it as 2000 or whatever they did, something like that, in the machine language. And it was very inexpensive. They didn't have to hire hundreds of people. But what I always required is that I stay over. And the reason I required that was because for some reason, when I did stay over, and I didn't always, but when I did, I noticed that I would get inspiration. I would get some really breakthrough idea. One client, Fairfield Bay, said I changed the timeshare sales process, changed the timeshare industry. On the second day, I came back and I said, well, you have all these timeshare owners. Why don't we enlist their help? They live by where your market is. And they said, well, we can't because, we're selling a real estate investment and, you need a real estate license. I said, no, you don't understand the business you're in. I said, you're in the entertainment business, right? I'm going to vacation and you've got golf courses and you've got water slides and all that. I said, what you should do is you should just create a point system and these guys are retired doctors and lawyers and people who are very, very skilled, but are retired now and in the way around the house and would love to get out and talk about going on vacation or something. And I said, and if the deal closes, you give them points, but you give them also points for however many they follow up, and they can choose however many they want. And at the end, you have like a golf tournament or something, or a fly in a P-51, or something, something entertainment wise that you can give them that's not related to the commission per se, but it's related to the activity. Well, they did that. And rather than trying to get people to come down to Arkansas, to the Ozarks, which was getting lower and lower and lower response, we did that. And I could tell you probably at least a half dozen that came to me overnight like that. And so take some time. Take some time to sleep on it. But Tom Fishburne says, I like this observation from David Rock. I came across in a New York Times article, which I do have downloaded and PDF'd. Incidentally, the WDMA website is down. My hosting company allowed hackers to penetrate their servers, and now they're charging me to tell them which files are infected, and I'm gonna have to go in by hand, and I'm gonna look for a new hosting site. But I think I have one already picked out. It seems to me it's their negligence, and this is the second time it's happened. And now I have to pay them to tell me where the malicious files are, even though they know they are there. It seems like a shakedown to me, because it costs more than the cost of a year of hosting. But anyway, so WDMA is down. If you really want these articles, just send me a note. LinkedIn is probably the best. And ask for them, and I'll send them off to you, attachment or an email or something. It's not a big deal. And the podcast won't be up until I get that fixed, but you can see the entire presentation on YouTube. If you look up Marketing News Daily, I think it is, or Miglash, and you can play those as if they were podcasts. So anyway, email introduced this problem of communication-driven distraction, but Slack put it to a new extreme. We both love and hate Slack because this company built the right tool for the wrong way to work. They said, with our modern culture wired in for always on communications, finding the space and time for aha moments is a challenge. We have to be deliberate if we want to create space for deep over shallow work. An idea Cal Newport helped popularize with his book Deep Work in 2016, and it's expanded upon it. I have that article also PDF'd, A study from Rescue Time found that most workers don't go 6 minutes without checking email or Slack. 35% of workers check communication every 3 minutes throughout the workday. And I believe this is the David Rock one. This is one of these, has really great graphs. It's this one here. Communication overload. Most workers can't go 6 minutes without checking email. Yeah. And that may be about right for me. But here's some of the graphs, okay? The median is 6. Median means the middle point of all of this data. Counted up, half are on this side, half are on that side. Okay, but the mode, I think it would be, is like 2 minutes. Can't even read it, it's so small. Okay, so there's a lot of people. Most of us are over here. And then there's a few of us way out here who can go 90 minutes, which is rare. Tom says he's trying to get to 90 minutes. I used to use a program, a little app called Pomodoro, and it means tomato in Italian. I don't know. It's like a tomato timer, and you can set it for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and just focus on the work for that. And that's really what I need to get back to. I'm gonna go find the app, and I'll let you know how I do on that. Okay, here's the average time from during the workday. 24% say 3 to 8 minutes. Okay, so it's similar to the other one, but it averages that across the whole thing with greater than 20 minutes out here. Okay, and maximum consecutive minutes without. This is the max. What's the max you can stand to do? 40 minutes. Now I do this pretty much every morning to prepare for the show. So I do, and I told my wife, please don't talk to me then. Maximum consecutive time without using email. And of course, it's not just email. I can check email, I can check social media. I'm in a bunch of like art groups on Facebook and bee groups on Facebook, and I have email from my easybees.com and WDMA and john@migmar.com, and those are some of them. And so there, I can continually be watching stuff. Plus my family, I did turn the notifications off on WhatsApp because, I would get a lot of them at this time of day when everybody starts looking. And here's what your week looks like when you're checking all that stuff. It's just a minefield of distraction. Okay, the blue is where they used email, and the gray is where they didn't use. And now I've got Outlook from from old school marketing that I'm using, and so I get messages there and have to check that differently than my regular email. And it's just, it is a disaster. Okay, and so here's some more of Tom's cartoons. Boom. Let's see. This is consistent with a report from Microsoft, which I didn't download, on how people use their office productivity software. 60% of aggregate time is spent involves communication, Teams, email, chat, video conference, etc., leaving only 40% of the time for creation. And that, according to the other article, you can see all of it broken up into little pieces, I remember I did my very first client to go out and visit on my own was Richard Brock, and he was a commodities consultant, and he helped farmers understand commodities markets, because he said farmers are at a huge disadvantage compared to commodities traders, because the farmers have all this grain. They actually have the grain. The commodity traders are just moving it around, trading futures and things. And so the commodities traders never have to accept the grain. They're just speculating. But they can buy the futures when there isn't any grain to buy, right? And so the price is low, the price is high, and so they'll buy futures at the high price, and then they can they can make those available at the low price. Anyway, the farmers have to sell when everybody else is selling, when all the other farmers are selling and taking their grain to the feed mill. And so but I remember walking into his office, and this was like 1981, probably fall of 81 when I started as a consultant. And he kept looking at his screen and looking over and looking away from me and looking at his monitor over here, you know. And I thought, wow, how distracting. How does he get anything done? It was before I had a PC, right? 1981, we did get one, and it went in my office because it didn't get used if it was out in the middle of the office. So it's hard to create big ideas if we're always in the minutia. One of the biggest skills in my own work, this is from Tom Fishburne, schedule has been learning to carve out 90 minutes of uninterrupted deep work at the start of every workday. And that's when I do the show preparation. I've learned to treat it as sacred space because it's always the most productive time of my week. That's probably true. And it's easier said than done, particularly when working as part of an always-on organization. Jeff Maurer observed about Slack etiquette at the office. You can mute notifications. Just go to settings, notifications, never get promoted, and turn the slider to on. But it is possible to establish new, but is it possible to establish new norms? A software company called Convictional decided not to use any messaging tools like Slack and made all meetings optional. Another software company called Pathway introduced a Zen day each week where they ask employees to put Slack in D&D mode to snooze notifications. I've collaborated recently with a Norwegian startup called Remarkable that makes tablets designed for deep work without Slack or other modern distractions. I think my style consultant has one of those. And Tom likes this piece of this poem called the Desiderata. I've heard of it. I've read it. Go placidly amid the noise and haste and remember what peace there may be in silence. I think you have to keep silent to get there, which is not my strength. Okay, did you get my emoji reaction to your DM response? Regarding my comment on the conversation thread on why we never seem to have time to get any work done. Yeah, right. Sorry, I got distracted by Slack. Where were we? Huh? Did you say something? Right, exactly. Put your phones away. Okay, meeting on whether to call a meeting to plan the meeting, a meeting to get... My daughter worked in a nonprofit, and she said this was exactly what it was like in about that actual time. Should we schedule our next Zoom meeting or just hit ourselves repeatedly in the head with a hammer? I don't mind Zoom meetings, but I tend to check too many other things while it's going on and not listen the way I should. Shiny object syndrome. We need to stay focused on our meeting priorities and not get distracted by every shiny new, look, a squirrel. Our marketing priorities, rather. This one I added to today's article. It wasn't part of it, but it's a famous and one of the most popular cartoons that Tom ever did. And I think the idea is similar, that people are not focused on the big ideas. They're not focused on the marketing goals. They're easily distracted by the squirrel. And that could be a new product idea. It could be a new Marstack product, etc. So let's get over to the LinkedIn one that I promised you. Okay, so this is written by AI and the LinkedIn community. How can you measure ROI and the impact of direct mail campaigns? Now you've got to understand, in my profile I say that I have some CFO fluency. Okay, I learned accounting from my CFO long time ago, and so this starts out, keep in mind your goals and metrics, because if you want to increase sales, you might want to focus on response rate, conversion rate, average order value, and revenue per mail piece. All good. Depends a little bit on revenue. Most of the time, revenue is top line sales, plus maybe shipping and handling, depending on how you handle that and how your CFO wants that handled. But generally, it's what's the total order, right? What's the total order? Okay, so I sent out 100 mailing pieces and I got 3 orders, and they were for $100, $150, and $200. Average order, $150. And you can compare that across mailings, okay? And sometimes you'll see, especially more elite lists that are more carefully segmented, you'll see maybe a higher average order but a lower response. They tend to be negatively correlated. When the response is high, the average order is low, and vice versa. If you want to generate leads, you might use metrics such as inquiries, signups, downloads, or calls. Now, right off the bat, you've lost me here because return on investment isn't cost per lead. A lead is not a return on investment for any CFO. You know, now that you may have built a correlation along through time and said for every lead we get, we generate $1,000 in sales or whatever, and then you can compare your cost per lead against your projected revenue per lead. But yeah, that's not ROI. Okay, that's something else. Okay. Next, use tracking codes and tools. And basically, they said you want to attribute responses to the specific mail piece that triggered them. Well, you know, most of the real mailers I know, the catalogers, don't use tracking codes much anymore. And the reason is because most people will take the catalog, look through it, decide what they want, and go online and pick up the cookie, give digital full credit, but also not put in the tracking code unless there's a specific benefit. And, you know, I had a real crazy experience over Christmas trying to buy from J. Crew where they had a tracking code on something I ran into. And then when you got there, depending on which items you put in, the discounts changed dramatically. And they had codes related to individual items in the sale area, and they had codes related to the entire order, and they applied them differently. And there were so many tracking codes, didn't make a bit of sense. And I finally gave up. My wife later placed the order and then called customer support and said, "You guys are all crazy, and I want this discount," and they gave it to her. I should have known. Anyway, what do most mailers use these days? You know, this is the sort of thing that you'd use if you were using billboards or if you were using TV commercials, you know, and you didn't have any way to know who got mailed. But in mail, direct mail right there, see direct mail? In direct mail, this is supposed to be about direct mail, you know who you mailed, even on a rented list. So that's what most people do. Most people say, okay, let's take everybody we mailed and see if they ordered subsequent within a reasonable amount of time, right? Let's see if their next door neighbors ordered. You know, I had a client that for every one order they got from existing clients, they got 2 more from pass along the catalog, right? Because they could see it was the next door neighbor. Now, there were probably more than that because we didn't count anybody that wasn't like immediately next door. But it gave us an ROI of 900%, and we'll talk about what ROI means. Now, compare your results with your costs. Okay, well, what are your total costs? Right? Mention cost. Doesn't say what costs. And here's where most marketers fall down, because they'll take the cost of the ad. They'll take the cost of the mailing. That's not your total cost. Your total cost is cost of the mailing, cost of processing the order, and cost of goods, right? So if you got a $150 average order, let's just say, about half to 2/3 of that is the cost of the merchandise that you shipped to fulfill the order. Okay, so now you're down to 75 cents or $75 of gross profit. Gross profit. Now you take out the mailing cost, and if you had a 2% response and you mailed it for $1, you spent 50 cents, or if you spent $50 for the mailing to get that order, something like that. Okay, so now you're down to $25. What's your order processing cost? Maybe $20. Pretty easily could be $20, or could be more than that. So now we're talking about a $5 total spread over that $100 mailing, or that $50 mailing cost. Okay, so your return, so it's like minuscule nothing, right? Now, what most people use is return on ad spend, which is wonderful, except that if you're selling a lot of low margin items, you know, I had a client that had a big catalog, beautiful, and they had about 1/3 of it was their own products, which they made about 60%, 70% margin. And the rest of it was things that they bought from someone else and resold, brought in, unpacked, repacked, reshipped. and it was about 20% margin. And so the more of that they sold, the more money they lost. It was ridiculous. Okay, so serious CFOs will say that's it. You got to get down to your EBITDA cost, your at least your three main costs, which are the cost of order processing, the cost of the mailing, and the cost of goods. Take those out. Now you're talking about return on investment. But now we're talking about A/B testing, split testing, and then what you do is you compare this to previous mailings. It says right here, you compare it with previous mailings or industry competitors or industry averages. Again, what you really want to know in a test is how much did it boost compared to the norm? Okay, what did it do over here? And so really you only want to compare that incremental lift for ROI, right? So when we talk about that 300% ROI or 900% ROI, that was compared against customers we didn't mail, okay? The incremental difference, so the average customer spent something like $10 a month after they'd purchased, okay? Our customers spent, the ones we mailed, spent something like $30 afterwards. Now you take all the costs out of that, and you've got about a $10, I think it was a $3. Yeah, it was about a $3 net profit, and therefore a dollar divided by 300 is 300%, okay, something like that. Don't do math on the fly. So this is what you get when you get LinkedIn AI giving you articles on how to do direct mail. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about Mike Gunderson's article on how to test, and it's much better. So I hope you made it to the end. Have a great day. Like and share. Your friends will know you're smart. Bye-bye.